So then the question becomes, how do we support HBCUs? And um, how would we help people to understand their need for existence and just to generate awareness? How would you recommend individuals do that?
Mm, I think that that's a a big question,
Yes.
and so I'm going to try and address this maybe point by point. I think a big thing is to recognize that these institutions are valuable, to sort of have a sort of baseline level recognition across Black communities, to know that these institutions, historically Black colleges, have served amazing purposes and continue to serve amazing purposes. They are not an alternative in the sense that they're not a fallback. They are some places where we can aspire to. And until we start to recognize and value our own institutions, until we start to say that this can be people's first choice and that's not a bad thing, until we start to recognize the fact that these are things that we can celebrate as cultural touchstones, as all of the things that we've been discussing over the course of this interview, as we learn to recognize the fact that these places have value intrinsic to them. Until we start to do that, I mean, it's going to be hard to further advocate for their existence, because again, if we tell everybody else, yeah, well, I mean, these are nice things to have, but they just holdovers from, a darker moment in American history.
Hmm.
Then people are going to say, well, why don't we just let them stay in that darker moment of American history? So I think it's been surprising, but the last 10 years, I think, have been quite um, significant in terms of like shining a spotlight. Well, really, past 20 years, honestly, I believe the bulk of this millennium so far has been an opportunity for folks to again recognize the significance of what HBCUs represent, and you see growing degrees of people sort of trying to appreciate their existence still. So and I worry because I don't ever want to reduce anything to the obligation or the sort of the purview of pop culture, but I think pop culture really does have a big and significant part of the a role to play here.
Hmm.
As we continue to tell stories about what HBCUs can represent. I mean, as you yourself sort of recognized, something like Drumline, that was a big deal.
Hmm.
And again, as we think back even further, a generation prior, something like A Different World, a big deal. These are the things that sort of help people to see, okay, well, yes, it can be cool to go to these places. You can have all kinds of experiences here. And, I think, again, the responsibility is to recognize the fact that you're not just going here just to play instruments or just to have step shows or whatever. The important thing is also to recognize that you go in there to learn, and you go in here to get a world-class education. But if you want to get people in the door, if you want to get people to recognize the fact that this is an option, showcasing it in mass media is a good way to do so. And also recognizing the fact that when we have major figures in the pop culture landscape who can be associated to these institutions. I mean, this is a little bit passe to say now because I don't know how relevant this person is, but I mean, you think about Common, the rapper Common. He
Hmm.
went to FAMU
Hmm.
and at Florida A&M. He was there for a few minutes or whatever, but then he ended up going someplace else. But yeah, no, I mean that's significant. You think about the writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, right?
Hmm.
Coates, the writer of Between the World and Me, that major landmark text. He went to Howard, and you think about all of these people who have links back to these institutions, and when you see successful people and you see people who want to emulate their successes, a good way to do so is to affix them to an institution that might have helped launch them off.
Sure.
And it's not to say that they wouldn't have been successful had they gone anyplace else, but I think that that's a good way to do so.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm trying to think of ways that might be helpful to do so, and it perhaps might feel pie in the sky to say leave it to pop culture. Pop culture will save us. But then
But
again,
no, I think, listen, pop culture is what informs most people about most things. Pop
yeah.
culture is about popularism, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times, I mean, how else do you think things get into people's psyches? Media and movies and music and things like that are incredibly influential things. Hip hop culture I believe, genuinely influences a lot of black culture, as opposed to the opposite. It used to be black culture informed hip hop, and now it feels like almost a caricature that has become hip hop has started to influence black culture, in sometimes negative ways, to be honest with you.
Mhm. For sure, for sure.
But I think, yeah, the idea that pop culture would be hugely influential and impactful in helping people to get a greater understanding of what HBCUs are and what they contribute and why they're beneficial sounds great. And to that end, then I would say Beyonce's Coachella thing
Yeah.
that's humongous, because I mean she's
Hmm.
probably the most influential artist of this generation that's alive
Hmm.
today, and I would think her choosing to highlight HBCU culture in that way, with all of her music, being the first woman to headline Coachella at this point, one of the biggest stages in existence, and then to put HBCUs so prevalent there with the outfits and the bands and just all of it. I thought that was humongous for a person like me who is so largely uninformed about HBCUs. I think it gave me, once I was able to associate it, it was like, oh, that's what this is. This is huge.
Hmm.
To date, I didn't know that A Different World was about HBCU. I hadn't even made that association. Sometimes I
Yeah,
can be a
yeah, yeah.
little weird and just not
No,
reasonable,
that's
but
okay.
yeah, I didn't see that. So I think even that's a huge deal, you know. And I would imagine for people, it's a little bit before my time, and also I grew up without television, so
Hmm.
but I would imagine there's probably a lot of people. There are probably people who made the choice to attend HBCU specifically from seeing that. So
Yeah,
I think all of those things are rather important. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
sure.
And you can't leave it all, but I mean that's still a hugely influential medium that probably should be explored. And I think the more people to do that, I think that would be largely beneficial.
Escape and float into